Does that work? Oh, it works, yeah. So I think it works at least. Hello, welcome. I hope you can hear and see me this time live from or out of Spain instead of home. Yeah, like I'm still trying to figure things out here. Hello, Mustafa Hassan. Welcome to our weekly Let's Talk About stream. Now, it looks like we're live, at least to me, it looks like we're live. As mentioned in the stream description, I think it should be mentioned there, yeah, or the title is actually mentioning already. Today's Let's Talk About is about Helium Network, a project I covered already in the past that basically allows you to earn HNT, a cryptocurrency that has been falling a lot like many other cryptocurrencies, but maybe a little more lately, and that has been a little topic of a lot of controversial. Basically, it allows you to run a hotspot. And we're actually going to switch the screen to there so you guys can see the Helium Explorer. And it allows you to run a hotspot. And then with that hotspot, you can basically earn, as mentioned, HNT. Now, right now, this is a map of Mallorca, the island we're currently at in Spain. And I just checked now. I didn't check before the stream. I was actually surprised to see that there are a lot of Helium hotspots now. Where do we start today? With the stream, yeah, or with the talking about Helium. I guess you should already know what Helium is. I mean, I've made a couple of videos about it, so you can find them on my channel if you have no clue what Helium Network is. But as mentioned, it's about like you have a hotspot that is basically a Raspberry Pi with an antenna and some extra components, and that hotspot you ideally place in a great location, and then it sends beacons out from time to time and witnesses other beacons, so the signals from other hotspots, and that's called proof of coverage, and for that you earn rewards. However, the issue with Helium Network is that many YouTubers have been pushing it, or content creators in general, as like it's gonna make you rich, like look how I earn $1,000 per month or more with my hotspot. And that was last year, and back then, I'm actually just gonna, how do I go back here? Okay, the back button is not loading here, but let's just reload the page. So that was last year, and early last year, there were only 90,000 hotspots. So in March or in February, when we ordered our first one, there were 90,000 hotspots. As you can see now, there are currently 940,000, and just the last 30 days, 25,000 got added to the list of hotspots. You can also see when we look at the map that basically the US and Europe are insanely well covered with Helium Network hotspots. I would say Europe is even better covered. I mean, there is literally only a few areas where it's not flashing up in that green color. If we look towards Asia and so on, China obviously is fully covered, Hong Kong and so on, whatever there is, Philippines, Thailand. So like there are a few countries that, or yeah, Thailand should be here, that are already well covered, but there's still room in the rest of the world in terms of further growth. But overall, Helium Network is already, grew very fast. Now, it will drop very hard this coming days. Hi, Metsfi Sugala, hope I pronounce it right. It already dropped. It dropped because of the latest HIP, so the proposal to switch from the Helium blockchain, so Helium is running on its native blockchain, to basically another blockchain, which would be Solana. It might drop more, but I think we're gonna talk about what I think about Helium and the price, I think a little bit further down the road in today's live. But what I first want to cover is, like I said, the basic or the biggest controversial. Basically, there have been so many hotspot orders and also some shady manufacturers, to be very clear about that, that didn't deliver in time. So some people ordered when there were like less than 100,000 hotspots and were expecting to still make $100, $200, $300 or more per month. And then they had to wait a year, or some of them are still waiting for the hotspots. And nowadays the earnings are lower. And the earnings are lower not because it's some elaborate scam or so, but simply because there is a pool of HNT that's minted, mined, whatever, minted, for the rewards, for the proof of coverage. And that's to reward all the hotspots for proof of coverage, so for sending out those beacons and witnessing other beacons. Now, if there's only 100,000 hotspots on the network and we would have, let's say, $1 million worth in rewards, even if you have a bad placed hotspot, you still get a relatively bigger share. Whereas if there is suddenly almost 1 million hotspots, well, you suddenly end up earning on average only a tenth of what you earned a year ago. Yeah, so if last year you earned $100 or 100 HNT to stay with HNT, then this year if we would have average performance, it would be 10 HNT. Yeah? To top that off, so if we go to, let's go CoinMarketCap, and there look for helium, or on top of that, we also have to consider that the value of helium has been dropping, and that is also a lot because people lost, like, yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, partially trust in the project because of manufacturers and so on. Then in general, since September last year or end of last year, markets have started to crash. So all cryptos have been falling, also stocks and so on have been falling, and HNT is no difference. The difference now is that in HNT, obviously with, yeah, more people lost hope because people didn't do their research, jumped on the train expecting to get their hotspot in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks and earn $1,000 per month. And now when they get their hotspot, they try to sell it, which adds further fire to, or fuel to the flame, because originally you needed a full hotspot. Like if we go to Cortex networks, and their Cortex X3. I also made a video about that one. It's basically a full hotspot, and you can see that it's right now $349, but I think it was more expensive back then because originally that small hotspot also had to keep a copy of the blockchain. Whereas a couple months ago, Helium finally introduced light hotspots, which means the hotspots don't have a copy of the blockchain anymore, which means the devices can be cheaper. So there are now light hotspots that cost around $200, or I think there's even a model for $180, which makes it a little bit problematic. If you bought a hotspot for $400 or more last year and you waited forever and now you get it and now you're trying to sell it, well, you don't get much money for it anymore because a lot of people didn't do their research, bought a hotspot, then not their fault, had to wait way longer than expected. So instead of expected 2 months, had to wait a year or maybe even longer, and are now trying to sell it. So there's right now a lot of secondhand hotspots on the market. And also people that earn helium and basically because of all of that lost a little bit trust in the project are dumping their helium. So however much or little they earn, they're selling it constantly. And that just leads to drive the price down, which is obviously a bad thing. Now, in general, another big issue is the success of helium. It's literally an issue because with the growth, let's approach this from a slightly different angle. So Helium Network is, as I said, you have that hotspot, and right now there's proof of coverage, but the actual idea is to create coverage. So like we have here in Europe, everything is pretty much covered. So you should have like a helium signal in quotes pretty much everywhere in Europe. Yeah, like maybe here there are some areas where you have no coverage, but in all the major cities and so on, it should be there. And it's meant for IoT devices, so for Internet of Things, like for example, a GPS tracker or I don't know, like a smoke detector or a water detector or something. Now, obviously, there are two factors. First of all, it doesn't make much sense in your apartment to use Helium IoT devices because in your apartment you also have Wi-Fi. So you can get just some sensors from Philips that also are Apple HomeKit compatible and don't require you to buy data credits and so on. So there are specific use cases for Helium. Like for example, one use case would literally be the GPS trackers. As somebody with a background in e-commerce and therefore know the struggles that companies have with shipping and so on, let's say there is an online store that ships expensive products, let's say new MacBooks, iPhones, expensive watches, whatever, and they will always have some packages disappear so that they ship it, but it doesn't arrive, yeah? And now they could just throw, for example, an Apple AirTag, so just in case you don't know what that is, Apple AirTag, that's Apple's product for, like basically you can put it in your luggage and so on, and then you can look up where your luggage currently is or anywhere else. And you can see one of them is €35, whereas a GPS tracker for Helium is €100, yeah? Problem with that is any iPhone or iOS device that's close by, if the tag keeps following it, so if it's in the truck and the truck driver has an iPhone, he will get a notification, hey, there is an AirTag following you, and he might probably panic, yeah? So it's kind of like, because he doesn't know why the fuck is there an AirTag following him, yeah? Whereas if we use a Helium GPS tracker, then he doesn't get that notification and so on, and the company would be able to track where the package is when it basically dropped off the truck, so where it disappeared, and they would have an easier time hunting down whoever is stealing packages from the delivery route, yeah? So that would be one of the use cases. Another use case would obviously be like remote sensors for, I don't know, like fire detector, smoke detector, something like that. If you, like I said, we're right now in Spain on Mallorca. which surprisingly has a relatively dense or good helium coverage. And there it's relatively dry, and there might be some risk of some fires. So obviously nobody's going to install Wi-Fi or something here in the mountains, and nobody's gonna, or like the 4G, if you would say you need a SIM card in your device, in your sensor, is more expensive than helium. So here, helium-based sensors would be a good solution. So there are some use cases, yeah. But the problem that people have is that helium had, like last year or so, if I remember it right, $50,000 in revenue from data credits, yeah, which is, again, over time, the rewards that we get for proof of coverage should fade out. And then we would only get rewards that's like in 20 years from now for data credits, so for actual data consumption. Now people are like, I don't know why, but it's like, yeah, the project's failed. There's only 50,000 in revenue. Now, if we consider a million hotspots that share 50,000 in revenue all over the world, well, it's going to be sad, yeah, obviously. But we also have to consider, if you are an IoT device manufacturer, so you are the guy that builds those GPS trackers, whatever, like motion sensors, liquidity sensors, whatever, yeah, so, or liquid detectors or whatever, yeah. Last year, there were 100,000 hotspots all over the world, so there was almost no coverage. Yeah, you probably wouldn't say, oh, in our company, we're now going to spend money and time to develop sensors that work with a network that has no coverage. Yeah, so there are only kind of like a few cases where companies already started to, okay, we already use LoRaWAN, but we cannot deploy, or deploying our own LoRaWAN network is expensive, so we switch to Helium Network to benefit from that. Or companies that are only using LoRaWAN in an area where already last year there were already hotspots for coverage and so on. So people, in my opinion, completely ignore that. First, we have to have the coverage, which is now the case with, as said, almost 1 million hotspots, and probably 2 months we'll have the million. And then we'll have the companies that might jump on board and say, hey, there is the LoRaWAN network, we can use it, it's cheaper than using 4G in our devices, and so on, and go that way. Yeah. Now, so there are a few things where I think people just don't think it through, and maybe got misled in the beginning about, hey, get your hotspot in 4 weeks and you'll make $1,000 per month or so. But that's already a big issue, and that's leading to, like random guy 69 mentions that the market cap of helium is free falling. Yeah, it's going down. But that's one of the reasons for it. So people that last year watched a video or saw a blog post or a TikTok or whatever that was like, hey, that hotspot earns me $1,000 per month, here's my link, order one too, yeah. And then the manufacturers couldn't keep up with the demand, and some of them outright, literally on purpose, yeah, I wouldn't say scammed their customers, but you know, like sold way more than they knew they would be able to produce. Some of them even had the hotspots ready, but set them up themselves to earn helium while it was still more profitable than it is now, and so on. So there were a lot of issues, and that causes people to leave the project, people to sell their hotspots, and so on. But that's not all there is. I mean, another issue is obviously if we look at location. So like, I mean, so for example, if we look at Mallorca, so here, that map here looks pretty solid. We see here in the main area of Palma, so where the airport and everything is, there is a solid coverage and so on. And also the hotspots here, a LoRaWAN hotspot has a relatively insane range. So we're talking about a lot of kilometers here. And the problem that exists as well is if we look closer here, then you can see even here on the beach area, there are hexes with 6 hotspots, yeah? And if we go to look at the city center, there are hexes with 11 hotspots in one hex. Well, and obviously nobody there is earning anything because there are just so many hotspots. So if we look here, they all have a horrible transmit scale because it's oversaturated. And if we pick, I mean, we can anyway already see. So this one here made 1 HNT. It's probably, that one here is the best one, 4.47. So that one is still deployed decently. It's probably on a high building. We can see that, yeah, because it reaches a lot of different points. And whereas the other hotspots here, so if we go back and pick whatever, that one with 146, it's still one of the better ones in the hex, yeah, but it probably, yeah, only has less, yeah. Random guy 69, but I think helium is just trying to solve a problem that's yet to exist, maybe ahead of its time. I think the problem already exists, you know, there are more and more IoT devices and so on. And I think it's just really that gap right now between last year there was no coverage, and so it's not interesting for IoT device manufacturers to even produce a device that uses Helium Network. And now within a year we got the coverage, but we don't have that many new use cases. I mean, there is Prova, or let's check heliummart.com. They have a Provan sensor package. I'm not sure if it's listed as our IoT devices. That would be the right category. Yeah, so you see, for example, here that, yeah. So there are already manufacturers that start to deliver or produce sensors, but then one also has to ask themselves, like, does it make sense? So for example, they have that whatever motion detector, and it's like 50 euro, a reduced price, yeah. If we check Philips motion sensor, it's cheaper, it's 40 euro, and that one is Apple HomeKit compatible. I mean, you need a Philips bridge for all those Philips devices, but that one's cheaper, it uses your Wi-Fi, you don't need data credits. So there's still the gap between, there is network coverage, but there are not too many devices that actually can use the coverage. The most popular really would be like GPS tracking and so on, yeah. Jose Fernando Segovia, personally, I'm buying more helium miners right now. They are very cheap. I'm buying MNT for 170 to 200 euros, so I'm adding 1 or 2 every month. I think it has a lot of potential, yeah. That's the point I was getting at, so, or that I'm trying to get at. So the free fall that we see in the price, I mean, one of the things is, I said, the general, let's call it crypto winter that's ongoing, where we see that started last year, last quarter of last year. And on top of that, we just have like people being pissed because they had to wait more than a year for their hotspot. And maybe when they ordered the hotspot, so even here in Mallorca, maybe when those people here in that 1hex ordered their hotspots, maybe there were no hotspots, and the guys were like, oh, I'm the first that's gonna set up a Helium hotspot here, and then the other 10 guys got their hotspots before them, yeah, and then it's like the 11th guy that gets it and so on. Yeah, I mean, I get that it sucks and so on, and so, many of them, even though they earn little, they will just sell it every month because they're frustrated with the project, or they will try to sell the hotspot. And like you said, like, hotspots are right now really, really cheap. And on top of that, the reason why the price is plummeting recently, so the last couple of days mostly, is because Helium announced in their HIP 50 or HIP 51 or some, whatever number it is, that they are considering, or with that HIP, if it gets approved, they would basically move from the Helium blockchain, which they developed because no other blockchain was far enough to use for Helium Network, in quotes, for what they need, and they want to switch to Solana. And the problem there is that many people point out is that Solana also constantly crashes, or not constantly, but crashes often enough that it's actually not fully decentralized and so on. So I think the idea to switch to another blockchain is not bad, because Helium itself, they save resources and time and so on to constantly improve and scale their own blockchain. But if Solana is the right choice is a big question, yeah. And yeah, as far as the Helium blockchain goes, with all their problems that they have, I mean, one also has to consider, like, again, last year it was 90,000 hotspots, or 1.5 years ago to be precise, it was 90,000 hotspots. Now we have 900,000 hotspots. It's like a crazy task for any developer to scale in that time frame. So it's kind of like understandable that the Helium blockchain is suffering from time to time. Some people are selling their used miner for $70 plus shipping. Solana is a bad choice. How low will HNT price go? Yeah, so I said hotspots are right now cheap. The question is Helium dead or not? And I think, like, I mean, I had a call with one of the guys from Cotix Networks earlier today, and what we talked about was that basically, the way I see it, it's kind of like an 80-20 or 85-50%, 15% situation. So there is like a chance that the project dies, yeah. Like, I mean, eventually it needs, obviously, companies and businesses that develop IoT devices that work on Helium Network, or companies that just develop their own applications and use cases that run on Helium Network to generate revenue. Then obviously there are also the 5G hotspots, but they are not really 5G, but 4G CBRS or something it's called, and only in the US and so on. But there is a small chance, maybe 15% is taking it too high, but there is a small chance that the project fails and dies. Okay, I mean, that chance we have with every project, that chance is with every platform, that is also with every regular business that you know. Like, if you buy, I don't know, Coca-Cola stock, while it's highly unlikely, theoretically Coca-Cola could also eventually go bellies up and your money's gone, yeah. So there's always risk in investment, yeah. However, there's also the chance that over time more manufacturers and so on actually start using Helium Network now that we have that insane coverage. And with that, there are then more data credits used, and suddenly you actually earn more for hotspots that are well placed. Because that's what it comes down to. If you're living in an area and the only place where you can deploy a hotspot is somewhere like this, well, then don't bother getting one. Then maybe even consider selling yours, because you get a couple money that anyway you wouldn't earn in, I don't know, half a year with the current earnings. So you get some money back. You might still be at a loss, but you recoup some of your money, yeah. And you actually do a benefit to all the other hotspots here, because if your hotspot is gone, the earnings for all of those will slightly increase, yeah. So when it comes to hotspots, I mean, we can also look at or what's it called? I think Origin Berry. No, wait, I have to look it up in the app. One of ours. So when it comes to hotspots, Original Berry Finch, yeah. Oh, that one, is that one on? Yeah, yeah, Original Berry Finch, yeah. It's all about placement. So if you get a hotspot and you're in a ground floor apartment in a big city and you then put it in like, I don't know, the closet, well, then don't be surprised if you don't make any money with it, yeah, because the placement just sucks, yeah. And if you take care of your placement, I mean, that one is also not the biggest earner, yeah. I mean, just in case you didn't notice, that here is the eastern part of Ukraine that's currently getting, or that used to be bombed, yeah. And if we look here, it's not much, but that hotspot in an area that is not as saturated earns 1 HNT per month. Now, at the current dollar value, that's horrible, especially compared to how the price was 6 months ago. But that hotspot is actually on the 7th floor of an apartment building mounted outside, and it's a Nibra outdoor hotspot. And we're still like not sure why it doesn't reach those hexes here, because it's roughly the same height and so on. And obviously right now in Kharkiv, some of or many of those hotspots might not be online anymore because the buildings don't exist anymore and so on. On the other hand, then here we have another hotspot. That one is also operated by us, and it's also outdoor, but that here basically, I'm not sure if we can show the relief here on that map. No, earnings, transmit scale, no. So basically this is a little bit an elevated area that overlooks the city partially, but there is only a one-story house, so only ground floor, and it's on the roof of that house mounted there. And it's like, it's not much, it's not making us rich, but it, as you can see, it still makes 3 HNT per month, yeah. So definitely not bad. Of course, in dollars, it's $10 per month for a hotspot that cost us $400 or $600, yeah. But it's still okay, and it's in an area that's not fully, or that's not oversaturated yet. Now, if we look more here, we can see that there are already hexes that were getting fuller, where I personally wouldn't get a hotspot anymore. And if I would have one here, I would consider if it's not worth selling it at this point. I mean, considering or depending on the earnings, or moving it somewhere else. But it really comes down, like, I think it's right now kind of like still an opportunity depending on where you are able to mount the hotspot. So if you're able to mount it somewhere where there are not 11 hotspots already or 10 hotspots already, and it's a slightly elevated area, maybe you even have the possibility to mount it outside of your house or apartment, then it's definitely kind of like, it's a risk, might be a risky investment, but definitely worth it in quotes. Now, if we look at other hotspots, like we have, for example, most of ours are right now offline simply because we had to move and leave Ukraine, yeah. But that one, for example, is one we have in Germany, and it's literally just sitting on the windowsill of our apartment because we don't have the option to install it in a better location. And as you can see, the earnings are horrible. So it earned $1 in the last month, and it's simply because A, there are not too many hotspots around, and B, and that here is in the valley, so like I would have to somehow get the signal down there, and B, we are not high enough, or the hotspot is not installed in a good enough location. So, and that's the problem that many people have. They get a hotspot, they install it crappy, and then they complain that it looks like this, yeah. On the other hand, if we, what's the other one? That one is in Kiev, that one is still live, and that one's also not perfectly installed. It's in the 6th floor of an apartment building and not outside, but just close to the window. And it's also not making us fortunes, but considering the placement and considering the situation that we have in Kiev, it's actually, we are okay with it. Yeah, and I'm gonna catch up with the chat real quick. bad choice. How low will Elrond is a better blockchain than Solana? Hi Ruben, yeah. I think there are many blockchains that would be better suited than Solana, but the hip is about Solana, and yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, I don't think that the blockchain that will be chosen will make a difference between success or failure in the next couple of years. Yeah, I mean, unless it's really a blockchain that completely tanks. Yeah, we know crypto and the original Helium white paper is about decentralization and so on. Yeah, and Solana is not fully decentralized, blah blah blah. But in the end, that's not gonna keep companies from using Helium Network if there is coverage. So that's not gonna be the make it or break it thing, in my opinion. I live partially in Mexico, and most of Mexico is empty when it comes to helium miners. I just put them in family houses, and to be honest, I have a few on my own house with different addresses. Uh, I bought the toolkit to make my own LMR 400 cable. Is cheaper than ordering it. Plus, you can make the size you need. Antennas are also cheap right now. And that's with the toolkit with the wires. It's actually great. And it's another important point. Again, installation is the key. Yeah, we also have some of the hotspots. So the ones in Kharkiv are at relatives of ours or at an apartment that we rent there. And the one in Kiev is like at a relative of a friend of ours, and we pay them a 50% share, which is not much right now, but still, yeah. And as said, I think like right now, some people are, in my opinion, overreacting. I mean, we can literally watch in real time how the price plummets. Yeah, I mean, we were at $3, and yeah, like, but yeah, does it mean it's time to sell? Personally, as you saw, or as you can see in the Explorer, when we go to my account, we currently have 120 Helium for $400. I'm not going to sell that, because if Helium goes to zero, theoretically, yeah, like losing those $400 will not make me poor, in quotes, yeah. And selling for $400 is also not worth it. I personally see that Helium still has a more than decent shot to actually grow long term. But we're not talking about like a week, a month or so. I'm literally talking about years here. So for the manufacturers to catch up to the coverage that Helium offers, for more use cases to be developed, and then the value should also go up again. It remains to be seen what an impact the 5G network that is, as said, available right now only in the US will have, and how many mobile phone providers are actually jumping on or going to use Helium Network to supplement their own network coverage. Yeah. So there's really a lot of variables in there, and I think like most people just focus on the negative variables in that case, that are about like, oh yeah, the manufacturers scammed their users, so some of them sadly did, yeah, and earnings are so low, which again can be explained by having 10 times more hotspots than last year, when there was a lot of like positive, get a hotspot, it's going to make you rich coverage and so on. So yeah, hi Snetkali, and hi, that's Akashi or not? Yeah, hi Akashi. Yeah, I'm gonna get the hang of it. Yeah, great to have you here. Not saying much because I don't know much about this project. Yeah. One point I wanted to share actually, since I had today, as mentioned, a call with Cortex Network, is that they are working on something cool that I've also been discussing with the CEO of Helium Mart, but they haven't been working in that direction. So, but Cortex has, and that's what they call flexi mining. And flexi mining basically means, because as you know, we had the Helium full hotspot. So as mentioned earlier, I closed the tab already with the full hotspot, yeah. But as mentioned earlier, initially the hotspots had to keep a copy of the blockchain, and that required more resources. Now that's not the case anymore. So there are many hotspots that actually have more RAM, more storage than they actually need. And flexi mining is basically Cortex's approach to use that resource by allowing you to run other apps. Like I covered most of them already either on my channel in a video or in our Discord community. Like for example, EarnApp, Mysterium Network, Honeygain, IP Royal, Peer2Profit. So most of those are bandwidth sharing apps that pay you for routing traffic for your device. So that makes sense if you have your hotspots in locations that have internet flat rates. And it depends a lot on your location. With some of those apps, for example, Honeygain earns well in the US, EarnApp earns well in the US. Peer2Profit also might earn well in the US, or IP Royal, but other apps might not earn well in the US, but better in other countries, yeah. But for Honeygain, for example, the average user in a year earns between $110 and $150 per year, yeah. And payout, you can either get paid via PayPal in US dollars, or you can get paid in Jump Task tokens. So it's a cryptocurrency with around a value of around $1.90, $2 per token. And what Cortex does with the flexi mining is basically they provide you, if you have a Cortex hotspot, so you see Cortex hotspots here, you can literally, where do we have it? Cortex dashboard. So in the dashboard, you can just select which services you want to enable. Obviously, it's not for free. Cortex is a company, so they want to make money. So you can basically say, okay, I want to, on this Cortex hotspot that we have, as said, in Germany, I could enable those flexi mining services. So I want to run Mysterium, which right now I'm running a computer 24/7 that runs Mysterium, EarnApp, StoreJ, IDENA, Pi Network, yeah, and a bunch of other things, yeah. But that computer uses $200 worth of electricity versus the hotspot that uses, I don't know, like $10 electricity or so per year. And basically you see that they would charge here $3 per quarter. So it's $1 per month if you want to use flexi mining to run Mysterium on your hotspot. Now the question is, will you earn $1 per month? That depends on your location, but it's worth a try. They also have a package where you can pay $5 per month, but it's billed quarterly, so you pay $15 every 3 months, and you can use any service then, yeah, if it's supported by a hotspot. And what's cool about the flexi mining, what I personally like a lot, is that they work on adding support for other hotspots. You can see that they have for their own hotspots certain apps supported. Then they have a Cortex X3 Alchemist edition, which we just received last week, but I haven't been able to set it up yet. That supports also the, now where do we have it now? Here, the stuff mentioned here, so Honeygain, Peer-to-Profit, and so on. And then they have separate firmwares for SenseCap, Syncrobit, Racri 1, V2, the MNT, Black Spots, Panther, Gold Spots, and so on, for those apps, yeah. And they're also working on solutions to run on other stuff as well. And on top of that, they are working on solutions or on integrating even more services. So you can see that they're testing a lot of services and how to integrate them into the flexi mining. And I think it's a great thing. So especially considering Helium earnings are lower, most of the full hotspots are by far not using all the resources that are in the hotspot. And flexi mining is, in my opinion, a great way then to say, okay, I'm going to pay the $15 for 1 quarter, so for 3 months, so I can use all the services. And then I'm just going to test for 3 months all the services that are supported for my hotspot to see which of the services is actually worth it. So if Honeygain, for example, would also, which one was it here? So, okay, that I cannot enable in the dashboard because it's on the other hotspot, but EarnApp would be also $2 per month, yeah, $2 per 3 months, so it's 66 cents. So I just get the $15 package for all the services, and if EarnApp brings me more than $1 per month or more than 66 cents, I know it's profitable and I keep it running. If not, I just cancel that one feature after the period. If you, just in case you want to look into that, if you don't have a Cortex hotspot, as said, there are hotspots that are supported. The way it works is you have to download an image, you flash your SD card with that new image, which adds the Cortex firmware features, and then basically you create your free account in the Cortex dashboard, and it will then show up with also those buttons. You go through the checkout where you can pay with credit card for the subscription, and then you basically will have a setup button here that is, I think, shown in this page here. So it's, yeah, flash the image, blah, 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 set it up in the dashboard, set your frequency, yeah, and then it's not shown here, but that might then be this guide. Yeah, so pay, so subscribe, yeah, for the quarterly stuff. And then when you click on it, for example, for Mysterium, you then have the install button, and then you actually have the install process that you would also have with Mysterium if you set it up yourself. And so, like, while Helium Network, in my opinion, has a lot of potential, I think on top of that, the fact that there are like 1 million devices out there that could also be used for other projects like Mysterium, which is a crypto-based proxy server of VPN network, or as said, EarnApp, StoreJ, and so on. So there are like a lot of things that could run on that would give more credibility, or not more credibility, but increase the value and the decentralization of other projects, plus give hotspot owners an additional couple dollars per month, yeah. So I'm gonna catch up with the chat real quick. So what do we have? I think I missed a few things. Okay. You live in Spain. We had that. You bought the toolkit. Yeah. Do you think it is a good investment now to invest in Helium? Well, check your location. Go to the Helium Explorer and click on the whatever, like crosshair icon, and check your area. Like, I mean, if your area doesn't look like it does here, for example, with like 10 and 11 hotspots and so on, but you have like most hexes only with one, so there's no number or only a few hotspots, then it's a good indicator. And then additionally to that, check it depends, like, if you're in a valley and you're surrounded by mountains, then it's kind of like you will not get much coverage. If you are living on the side of a mountain and you're overlooking a bigger area, well, then you will get better coverage. So like, for example, if we look a little bit here, further out, if we pick here on the mountain, one of the hotspots, so great placement on the mountain, you can see it earns 10 HNT in a month, yeah. And yeah, although we only see one side, so those yellow lines here only indicate the witnessing, but not how much or what that hotspot reaches, yeah. But it definitely has a great coverage, and you can see it has like great earnings above average simply because of great placement. So your location is pretty much the #1 factor. If you would live on a mountain, but there's also already hexes with 10 hotspots, yeah, then it's not worth it. But yeah, so your location and how many other hotspots there are a really valid factor. And nowadays you have the advantage that if you decide, okay, it's actually might be having a might have potential for your location, that there are so many hotspots now available, new and also used ones on eBay and so on, for decent prices, that you don't have the risk, oh my God, until I get my hotspot, it might not be worth it anymore, yeah. Anyway, so that was that. Where now my chat moved somehow now, blah blah blah. Okay, yeah, we said hi. Take this time to build and accumulate right now when everyone is scared the crypto prices will go up, miners and tenors and all of that. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, as said, there is the small chance that the project just dies, but then to be fair, LoRaWAN is not something that's Helium exclusive, so there are also other projects out there that work with LoRaWAN, although none that's like with Helium where you get rewards and so on. So somebody, just like Cortex comes up with their solution to add other features to your hotspots, somebody might then come up with a custom firmware or some update that suddenly all those Helium hotspots run on some other kind of network, blockchain or whatever. So like, there is a small chance that if you buy a hotspot now for $200, even though you have a good location and so on, that it will take you forever to make your money back, or that you don't make it back. But I also think that Helium actually has potential, and that it's really just the gap that the project grew so fast from, as I said, less than 100,000 hotspots to almost 1 million hotspots. But in the same time, it's been a year or a year and a half, like not as many manufacturers jumped on the train of, okay, we're now going to produce devices that take advantage of this cheap and great coverage network. Yeah. Yeah, noted. Can you see all your Cortex miners in one interface? Can you yeah, like, I mean, you can add all your hotspots. You can also add your third-party hotspots. You can see we have here our Brovan. One of them is Brovan, and the other two are Nibra outdoor hotspots. So the ones that we still have online, we added here, and that's the Cortex hotspots that we have as said sitting in our window at our windowsill at home. So you can add all your hotspots in here, and you see all of them in here, and you also see some details. And for the ones that either are from Cortex or that run the Cortex firmware, so if you set up the Cortex firmware to use flexi mining, you can also reboot them from here and so on. You also see earnings and blah blah blah. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's not the nicest dashboard, but it gets the job done. And as said, like, I like the flexi mining feature. Project has failed. There's already plenty of IoT sensor choices on the market. None want or need the Helium network. That's why revenue is low. Helium has spent 400 million to generate 50 to 100K in revenue. Doubtful any more VC will pump more money into developing Helium. I disagree with that, to be honest. Yes, there are sensors out there, but to be fair, if we look, for example, as mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if you saw that, at the Mary IoT, so from Brovan, smart home starter kit, they're selling sensors that nobody needs, yeah, because like why would you get a motion detector, again, that's like for your home, yeah, why would you get a motion detector that runs on helium where you then have to pay data credits that doesn't work with Apple HomeKit, when you can, on the other hand, for less money, so that motion detector, as you see, is €50, you can get for €10 less a Philips motion sensor that works with Apple HomeKit. So yeah, there are like some sensors out there, but many of them are just missing the mark. But there are also plenty of use cases there. If you check the Helium Network subreddit, for example, there are like, I don't know how you say that, use cases or reports from people that mention that in their business, they are tracking shipments with GPS sensors or location sensors that run on Helium Network to detect like when packages get lost. There are also cases of, I read of one case where it's about like transporting marijuana, so but for legal dispensaries, and where they had issues with their quality of the weed once it arrived, and then they put temperature sensors into the cars and the trucks and so on, and noticed that the issue is that when they're driving them from wherever, I don't know, like the south of the US or from Mexico, wherever to wherever they want to sell it, that the storage room just heats up too much, and they can monitor it better with those sensors on Helium Network, and it's cheaper than doing it with 4G solutions. Yeah, there's also like Helium Mart, so that online store here that's like has like close ties with Culchip and with Provan. They are what's the word, deploying sensors to, for example, measure temperature in like industrial freezers. So also like when you know, like you go to the beach and they have those, not vending machines, but those freezers with drinks and so on, that are usually put up by third parties, so they don't belong to the store that has where it's placed, but they belong to a third party that basically puts them there, and the store owner gets a cut of the profit. But they're to deploy temperature sensors or airflow sensors or something like that run on Helium Network to detect if the store owner, for example, turns them off to save electricity, which might spoil the product, or if they don't close the doors properly for longer periods of time, which might spoil the product, and so on. Also for ice cream freezers and stuff like that. So there are use cases, but you still have to consider that last year there was almost no coverage in most of the world, so it was not really interesting for many of the companies that could benefit from Helium Network to even jump on the train or try to utilize it. And now, a year or 1.5 years later, we're actually only at the point where we have like pretty much most of Europe and most of the US lighting up like a Christmas tree with decent coverage. So that's why I personally wouldn't say that it's failed. Yeah, and obviously I think it was $58,000 last year's revenue from data credits. Yeah, and obviously that's not a lot. Although one also has to consider 1.5 years ago it was 100,000 hotspots. So yeah, like then 50,000 revenue is kind of like yeah, like a little bit better. And now it's 1 million hotspots, so 50,000 seems like ridiculous. But I think like we will have more and more IoT devices. I mean, that's the whole premise of Helium Network, that over time, so over the next 5, 10, 15 years, there will be more and more IoT devices, and they will need ways to communicate cost efficiently. And Helium Network provides that. The coverage is there now. And yeah, like, I mean, there's still a chance that the project fails totally, but I wouldn't call it failed right now. I think like most people are just like, let's say, uneducated potatoes, yeah, because they didn't do their research. They watched a TikTok, YouTube video, whatever, where some guy showed them, hey, that hotspot earned me $1,000 last month. Click on my link below and order yours. And then they had to wait a year or longer, or some of them still didn't receive their hotspots. And when they then got it, there were already not 100,000 hotspots, but 500,000 hotspots, and earnings were already 1/5. Plus there was a halving in between on top of that, so earnings were actually 1/10 already. And then they complain about, no, I'm not earning. I paid $800 or $600 or $400 for my hotspots, but I'm not making any money at all. And yeah, like I think so. That's one of the big issues, that people don't do any research. I have to admit that, you know, like I also don't read every proposal that's written and so on. But like most people do no research at all. They bought the hotspots assuming that it will print them money, and they're now pissed. And that's why they either sell it with low value or spread negativity, or why they set it up somewhere where there's no point setting it up, because there are already 10 or 20 hotspots in the tags. And I mean, if we look in some areas in the US here, yeah, on the East Coast, I'm sure that's gonna be, yeah, like, I mean, that actually doesn't look that bad here, to be fair. Would have expected it to be worse here. Let's see. I mean, I'm very bad in geography, so I'm not sure where the major cities are here, yeah. Let's zoom out, and I mean, that looks like a Christmas tree. Yeah. Actually, surprisingly little, like, okay, what's up here? Okay, that looks even worse, yeah, so I guess might get lucky here to see like just how not to do it. Okay, still have the zoom. Yeah, so like honestly, 24 hotspots in one hex, 20, 21, and so on. Of course, there are 21 people that are pissed that they got a hotspot, understandably, but there are also 21 people that probably don't do any research about it, yeah? And blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm doing fine. No, nobody gets my number. My number is for family and friends only. So if you need something, there's like our Discord community. You can leave comments on videos. You can ask in the chat. And for business inquiries, there's an email address in the about section of the channel. But my personal number is exactly that, my personal number. Hi, Pixie. Great to have you here. Problem isn't hotspot owners. It's Helium inability to sell the network to anyone. Helium in California have no sales force selling this to European business. There is no scale. Yeah, I don't think it's about selling to anyone. It's about like getting the attention. I mean, if you want to, maybe that's what you mean by selling, but getting the attention of companies that develop IoT devices. Yeah, so that's what it's about. And to be fair, that's not something that Helium Network alone can do. That's what everyone can do. You know, like for example, if instead of everyone bitching around, like let's talk about the perfect scenario. So instead of everyone or most people or many people complaining, if I mean, we know that like many people own more than one hotspot and so on, yeah. But let's say those 900,000 hotspots or the 1 million hotspots, let's say on average each person owns 4 hotspots, which I think is a high estimation. Then then there would be 250,000 actual hotspots owners. Now, let's say if those 250,000 hotspot owners would actually start sending emails to, let's say, Philips or Elgato or I don't know who else manufactures IoT devices, and ask them, could you please, or we would like to have that sensor running on that block on that network. That would get things also moving. Like if there is demand, people show, okay, we want that, we're willing to pay for it, then the companies also move in that direction. Not always, but I think that also would work. So instead of complaining about that, there is obviously it's like, yeah, it is a fact. There is like less or little actual traffic going on over Helium Network. But instead of just complaining about, like, people can also do something about it. Yeah, like actively reaching out to the companies that produce IoT devices and think about which IoT devices make sense. Yeah, like I said, like motion detectors might make sense if you have a, I don't know, like a remote cabin somewhere. Yeah, so like for, I don't know, people that have remote cabins somewhere in Canada or somewhere else, there it might make sense to have like a motion detector that runs on LoRaWAN. Same with some other sensors, but I guess in most cases it's gonna come down to industrial appliances, and there it really like depends on the company. I think there are a lot of use cases, and I think it's just about like, yeah, creating awareness in quotes of the right people and businesses. But that's something that takes time, and that's something that each and every one of us can do. Yeah, like either way, like, so I wouldn't say, that's my point, like I wouldn't call Helium a failed project. I think it's like a lot of the whole negativity simply comes from people expecting to be rich by ordering one hotspot, then being pissed understandably that they didn't get the hotspot. Like it was said, okay, 2 months delivery time, and it took a year or longer, and I said some people still haven't gotten the devices from some manufacturers, and of course they're pissed because of that. But most people, I bet you most people that complain never bothered to look up how the whole distribution of proof of coverage works. that it's a pool that's distributed among all hotspots, of course, depending on how many signals you send, so beacons you send and how many you witness, and that pool is supposed to be reduced over the next 22, 23 years or so that's left there, and that there are also halvings involved over time. So most people didn't even do the basic research there and are complaining about it, and I think that's just one of the issues. Yeah. Overall, I agree with Jose Fernando earlier. I think it's now, if you have access to decent locations that are not oversaturated, I think it's a decent, yeah, don't want to say gamble, but I think the risk-reward ratio right now is reasonable to say, okay, get a couple hotspots. If you have the locations and they're decent, set them up and wait 5 years. Yeah, either it's investment that flops and you lost some money, okay, or there will actually be more manufacturers that actively sell helium or sell IoT devices and devices in general that run on the LoRaWAN provided by Helium Network. And I think the gamble is like reasonable and worth it. Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, we're already over time, so actually those streams are meant to be 25 to 30 minutes. We're already at 50 minutes again, and I still have to go out and enjoy my vacation. As mentioned, we're currently in Spain. But yeah, so now you know, if you haven't heard about Helium Network before, take the time, watch the videos I made about them originally, although back then obviously earnings were higher and so on. But I also in my videos point out like that it's about location and so on, yeah. And just check your own location, check on the Helium Explorer. Are there already 20 hotspots in your area or not? And if there are not 20 hotspots, but there is like a few hotspots and so on, consider, check eBay, check whatever other like second place market there is for you, what the prices are. You should be able to get hotspots for $200 or less right now. Yes, with the current price of helium, it's going to take some time to make your money back, but that would be an investment in the future. So not to make you rich today, but actually where you would basically, if you think there's room for growth in terms of, or if my opinion makes sense to you as well, that simply the growth of the Helium network was like this, but obviously device manufacturers and so on haven't had the time or to actually see, okay, there's great coverage, we can jump on the train and benefit yet, then consider getting one hotspot or don't. Either way, I mean, I will keep ours up running and we'll keep collecting HNT. If it eventually turns to zero, so be it. I mean, it's like can't win with every investment. But personally, I think the chances are higher that over the next 5 to 10 years, it actually will turn around and become worth more. Yeah. Blah blah blah. So last comment here to answer. Helium isn't putting its network in front of IoT providers. Vodafone is selling small packet LTE-M to IoT providers. 19 million smart meters, which Helium isn't supplying. You mean SIM cards, yeah, with LTE-M? Like maybe I'm misunderstanding here something, yeah. But yeah, like I mean, it's anybody, you know, like I mean, for example, considering there's a million hotspots, there's a chance that some Helium hotspot operator or some hotspot owner also knows somebody that works in a company that currently uses LTE or 4G or whatever data package from Vodafone or any other provider, and that could basically bring the idea up in a meeting and say, hey, why don't we try to switch our devices to that network? Yeah, because it would cost us less money or whatever. So point is, there is potential, and point is, there is coverage now. A year ago, there was coverage in the US, but still big parts of, for example, Europe were still not fully covered. So now there is, at least in the US and Europe, which would be two major markets, great coverage in my opinion. And that's, in my opinion, a huge point. Now, sure, there is the chance, I said multiple times, that the project still completely fails, but I wouldn't consider it failed right now. I would consider it a victim of its success, to be honest. Like, the growth of hotspots just went too fast, and a lot of those hotspot owners or people that bought hotspots just expected that it's a money printing machine. Yeah. Anyway, I have to go now, so I hope I was able to address some concerns, or at least you have now a second opinion or a different perspective on like if you were super bearish on helium, maybe now you have a different perspective to see, okay, it's not as bad as you saw it before. Maybe nothing changed for you, whatever. Yeah, like either way, thank you all for tuning in, and see you then next week with another Let's Talk About. You can check the community tab of my channel to see how you can vote on which topic we'll cover. And besides that, there's no gaming stream this week because we're on vacation, so I don't have my Xbox and so on with me, and I didn't know beforehand that the internet connection here would be good enough anyway. And so next stream next Tuesday. And yeah, with that, I wish you all a pleasant week, and we are going to enjoy the rest of our vacation, and see you all next week. So till then, bye-bye. If I find the